Ladies and gentlemen, we are weighing in. Mark Ostrander, Grant Turner, David Mirikitani, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by AthletePS.com. Go to AthletePS.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. The boys are back. First name Mark is officially back now that we're going to talk about college rankings. GT and I talked about that this week. First name Mark and Bald Jaden are my two favorite versions of those people. So we are going to, over the next 5-6 weeks, guys, we're going to do 2 weight classes a week and the team stuff and sprinkle in what else is going on in the world of wrestling. First of all, Mark, GT, how you guys doing?
Good.
Doing great, brother.
You caught up on your sleep, GT?
I think I'm back to normal now.
Yeah, it's you and I talked off the air. You're obviously a part of some high level things and humble about it, but it does take a toll on your body, man. So it's nice to sleep in your own bed and get some rest and then get back ripping and running, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When does NAI get a start in the room, Grant?
Same as D1s. I think it's like October 12th or 15th or something like that for official every day in the room practice. So
okay.
It's unofficial preseason or whatever it is called. So the guys are, lifting and running and, getting drills in and things. So
we've got Mark for 40 minutes today. They're going to push a couple things off till he's done. But the one thing I know all three of us want to do, Gary Abbott's birthday was this week. So I think everybody knows how grateful I am to Gary. First person to kind of reach out to me, Mark, when we were over at track, brought us over here. Really one of the GOATs, if not the GOAT of wrestling media. So I just wanted to say happy birthday, Gary, publicly. Plus, now I'll make sure he actually puts this episode on YouTube for us. Mark, you want to say anything to Gary?
Yeah, happy birthday, Gary. I enjoyed working with you at Nationals and getting to see kind of what you do day in and day out there, and you put in a tremendous amount of work. So appreciate everything you do.
GT?
Yeah, man. Gary is for sure the GOAT. Everybody that's been around USA Wrestling has worked with Gary and knows how hard he works. Man doesn't take any sick days, so trying to force him to take some vacation days for himself a little bit. So hopefully he gets some time off and gets to spend his birthday with, friends and family. So happy birthday, man.
Well, he didn't answer my response to happy birthday, so that was a good start. Good. All right, we're going to get into it. Okay, so if you're watching at home, if not, we'll talk about this. If you're listening, we have the Flow and Intermat rankings. Intermat put rankings out earlier and then updated theirs. Flow updated theirs. So what we have here are those two side by side. We can also toggle over to the bracket. Not a lot of discrepancies at the top. We will make some picks here, but just if people aren't listening, sort of it's Spencer Lee, Patrick Glory, DiAgostino, McKee, Courtney, Barnett, Kaler, Cardinal, and then in that next sort of group, consensus-wise, Mastro, Ramos, Heinzelman, Certain, Anthony Noto, Joey Prada, Robbie Howard. And you go down further, again, if you're cutting your grass or something, instead of watching this, Medley, Jarrett Trombley's going to drop down from 33 to 25. Caleb Smith is a guy who's ranked very differently here, which we'll talk about. Ryan Miller, Liam Cronin, Jared Lane, Dylan Shaver, Justin Cardani, Kyson Terrakina, Joe Manchios, Steve O'Poulin, Anthony Moulton, Eddie Ventresca, Braxton Brown, Logan Ashton, Antonio Lorenzo, and Greg Diacomahalis, a couple other guys down here. But generally, that's your top 30 or so. So, Mark, you're the guru of the rankings. When you look at this, what jumps out? Let me ask you this. What jumps out at you, and how many of the top 8 do you feel like will definitely All-American?
Well, what jumps out to me is Vito's not in there, so obviously they're hearing things that we haven't heard yet, that he's going to go up to 33. Don't be surprised if he ends up at 25. That's just my opinion. I don't know. but I'm kind of surprised that he's not in here because it's the first time I've seen, the previous rankings, he was in 25 David, earlier on this year when they came. So he's not in here now. So maybe he's made the decision to go to 33. He did that last year. He started out at 33 and then went back down. So I guess we'll see.
So Mark, on that point, do you think he'll place higher at 33 or 25?
I think he'll place higher at 25.
I mean, I think if Spencer's not healthy, him and Glory are a coin flip. I mean, he could win it.
Yeah.
And he's a coin flip to make the finals.
Yes.
At 33, which we'll go down to in a minute, there's two guys there that are really good, and he'd have to beat one of them to make the finals almost no matter what.
Yep. I agree.
So let me jump over to you, GT. If I'm Cornell, I think Diakama Hollis, Little Greg D at 25, and Vito at 33 is better for dual meets. But unless you think Diakama Hollis is going to place at 25, and it's pretty salty here, I think Vito scores more, places higher and scores more bonus at 25, and they plug somebody else in at 33. You're a coach that has to deal with these kind of decisions with a ton of depth and getting to take 12 instead of 10. Is that kind of how you'd see it based on what we know, or do you look at it differently?
Well, I mean, once again, I don't know what Diakama Hollis, the young one, has been doing over the summertime and how much he's gained traction. And once again, preseason rankings, once again, and you guys have done this for a very long time. I'm new to this ranking world when it comes to the specifics on how all that stuff works. But I don't know how good Diakama Hollis will be kind of coming out and being the man at 125. I know that, in my opinion, I mean, if he's 2 or 3 at 25, he's probably going to be 2 at 25. He's 3 right now at 133. I mean, he's still going to have to go up against Glory in the semifinals if the seeds ring true all the way through the season.
Right.
So, he very well could make finals at 125 like he did last year, or at 33, he would have to knock off 2 legit contenders that have been in the finals the past 2 years at 133. So a little bit of points difference between maybe getting second and third, but it's not necessarily guaranteed that he would make finals either at 125. Because
last year, what he lost the dual meet against Glory, beat Glory badly at the EIWAs, lost to Glory in the semis of the Nationals, but then tore his way through the backside, took third, and got bonus in both those matches. So,
right.
I mean, obviously Mike Gray's got his finger on the pulse of things more than we do, but it's fun to talk about this stuff and take a look at it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, let's do this. Let's do 3 picks. We'll do how many of the top 8 do we think are going to All-American? We'll pick our finalist, and we'll pick a non-top 8 guy to All-American. So, Mark, you can go. You can go first this week, and we'll switch it up next week. So, how many of the top 8 All-American?
I'm going to say 6 All-American, David.
Okay, 6 of 8. GT?
Yep.
I'd say 5.
Okay. And I mean, I'll just count mine off. I think Lee, Glory, D'Agostino, McKee, Courtney, but then it gets a little, I mean, Barnett's done it, but all those other guys have been in the 7th, 8th match. And especially if Vito comes back down, that bumps one of those guys. So I'll go 5 of 8 too, especially because there's obviously a chance that Spencer's health isn't great. So I like that pick. Marco, who you got for your 2 finalists?
Well, from what we're looking at right now, I'd say Spencer and Patrick Glory. I think they're kind of quite a bit ahead of the rest of the guys. Yeah. I mean, watching Spencer wrestle Glory a couple years ago, they weren't real close matches, but they were competitive, which makes a difference. And I haven't seen anybody else on this sheet that's been competitive with him. So,
okay. GT.
I mean, if Spencer's healthy, Spencer Lee, and then I'd probably say, I'll take Pat McKee.
Oh, McKee's going to stay on the front side. I like it. Normally he just loses and then just kills everybody.
Yeah.
I'll go Lee and Glory. I wanted to point out a couple of discrepancies here, guys. Flo's got Mastro at 14. Intermat's got him at 9. Certain's 3 different. Probably the biggest one is Caleb Smith, 8 on Flo and 18 at Intermat. And I'm peeking at the brackets. So last year, Suriano was first. He'd be out. Glory was second. Aruja was third. DiAgostino 4. McKee 5. Courtney 6. Barnett 7. Kaler 8. Round of 12 was Cardinal, who's back. Latona, who's up a weight. Prada, who's back. Certain's back. So I feel like Certain is getting a little bit disrespected here. He's in our rankings. If you simply plugged in Lee for Suriano and pull Vito out, he would be at worst 10th. So, Caleb Smith, I guess, to me, that's very interesting that he's, that a couple of these guys are ranked above Certain. Like Malik Heinzelman didn't do as well at Nationals. I could see Ramos because he was around a 12 guy down a weight, but Certain did better than Mastro at Nationals. I don't know. I just find that a little surprising. And then what do you guys think about Robbie Howard? It feels like Penn State, probably the only criticism you can say about Penn State is they haven't had a ton of success over the years at 125. Mark, what do we think about Howard, being healthy and maybe being able to get on the podium for them at Penn State?
Well, I think that's the question. He's absolutely talented enough to place at this tournament. Can he stay healthy? And he hasn't stayed healthy the last 2 years. So until that happens, I don't project him to be an All-American, but I think he's right in that round of 12.
And GT, Tremblay drops from 33 to 25. If he can handle that weight cut, that's a big boost for NC State. He takes over for Camacho, who had won some big matches over the years for them, but didn't get on the podium. Tremblay was, he's short for 33, so maybe the weight cut's not terrible. He's obviously like a head shorter than Latona. It's interesting watching those guys flip-flop in the same conference, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you scroll up a little bit? Yeah, so he is the highest ranked guy from the ACC.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. So he'll be the, if it holds, he'd be the 1 seed coming out of there. Yeah. And the ACC is not very deep at this weight. Ventresca is the only other one ranked. And then Cooper Flynn, which is really, he's the same thing as Ventresca here. They just rank 2 different guys. So I'll put him in here like this. So there's a couple weights where they, both these sources have different ones. This is a probably good time to point out that when we did these in the preseason, our process, Mark and Grant, where we would take the bracket, we would do it the week after Nationals. 1 through 8 was pretty simple. The round of 12, we generally did it off where they were seated. So if like Grant had been seated 9, Mark 10, and me 11, then that was the order we put them in. Same thing in that round of 16, same thing in that round of 24, and then the same thing with the final 9 or final 8. And then if the other guy that went 0-2 was back, then you start plugging guys in. It's like a Vito plugs in, like a Spencer Lee plugs back in, those kind of things. Like, if a Ferrari was wrestling, he would plug in. So our system, like every system, probably has some flaws. But it's probably, I believe, the most defendable system because ultimately, when you think about how good wrestlers are historically, it's how well in college, it's how well they did at Nationals. It doesn't matter. Like Connor Flynn beat Mekhi Lewis 1 year in a dual meet. Like the only reason I remember that is because it was Missouri and it screwed up the rankings and seedings all year. But Mekhi Lewis won Nationals that year. And I guarantee you Connor Flynn would take that win back if it meant he was going to be a national champion. And I guarantee you Mekhi Lewis wouldn't trade a win for not winning Nationals. So we go off of Nationals. Mark, you remember we talked to Andy Hamilton about this when we first started because there was like the Leland Weatherspoon. I can't think of the Iowa guy's name now that beat him every time. Alex Meyer, I think it was. Yep. And Weatherspoon had placed at Nationals and Meyer had beat him every time. And at the time, Andy goes, well, you should have Meyer above him. I go, if I do that, I have to go back and look at every result at every weight class. If I just go by nationals, I'm consistent. I might be wrong, but as soon as they hit a dual meet and Meyer wins for the 14th time, then we can flip them or meet them in the middle. So some of these other guys are doing it differently. They're counting regular season results. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Let me say this. I have so much more fun looking at other people's rankings than doing this. And Mark's marriage has gotten a lot better because he gets to see his wife on Sunday nights now instead of having to talk to me for 4 hours. So I would say this. We all have a ton of respect for the people that are doing the rankings. It is a thankless, tireless, hours consumptive task. So when we point this out, we're not saying they're right or wrong. We're not saying we're more right. I'm just telling you what our criteria was, and we tried to do it in a way that was defendable and repeatable and consistent. So anyway, we got to pick our non-top eighters to be an All-American. So Mark, you're running first today. So who's your non-top eighter?
Matt Ramos. I think he places top 5.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to put that in there so we don't forget. Marco? GT, sorry.
Mastro.
Okay. And I'm going certain. He went from 1 and 2 to 3 and 2. I think he gets on the podium this year. Okay. So we'll go down to 33. And I'll move this down here so it's easier for me to see this. Okay, RBY 1, Fix 2. They plugged Vito in at 3. We can talk about that. McGee 4, Bird 5, Ragusan 6, Cannon 7, Philippi 8, Foley 9, Kolioko 10, Hernandez 11, which is in one of the polls, 29th in the other, which we'll talk about. Arini 12, Lamont 13, Latona 14, Shriver. Am I pronouncing that right, guys? Is it Shriver or Shriver?
Shriver, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Shriver, Teskey, 15. Rich, 16. Bisco, 17. Heilman, 18. Ramazan, 19. Drury, 20. Madrigal or Wyatt Henson, 21. Kaler, 22. Palmer, 23. Dryden, 24. Nagao, 25. Carter, Connor Brown, Gabe Tag, Carter McGonigal, Jackson Desario, and on down the line. And you guys can obviously visit Flo and Intermat. We just pulled these straight off of here and combined them. So I'll go first here. There's a truckload of All-Americans here, like RBY, Fix, Vito, McGee, Bird, Ragusan, Cannon, Philippi, and Foley have all been on the podium, and so is Taylor Lamont, I think. And wasn't Sam Latona an All-American at 25 a couple years ago?
Yep.
So, I mean, you're talking about 11 guys that have All-Americaned here. So if you go to the brackets, just to give people a sense of it, RBY was 1, Fix was 2, DeSanto, who's gone, was 3, McGee was 4, Bird was 5, Corbin Myers, who's gone, was 6, Cannon is 7, Devin Turner, who's gone, is 8. The round of 12 here was Ramos, who dropped down, Courtney from Virginia, who's gone, Mickey Philippi, Dylan Ragusan. The round of 16 was Arini, Chance Rich, Richie Kaler, and Heilman. And so I'm guessing that the argument for Hernandez here is, I mean, it's interesting because Heilman transferred over to Rutgers, it looks like, and I don't know how you justified Hernandez at 11. I'd be interested in, talking to Earl. And again, maybe I'm missing something, but tons of All-Americans here. GT, as you look at this weight, like, what are sort of the tiers in your mind, and where would you have ranked Vito if you were forced to do so?
Yeah, I would probably put him at 3 or 4. I mean, once again, I don't really. Yeah, I don't know where else you would have put him other than 3 or 4. I think that's kind of just the tier that he would be in. I mean, I think RBY and Fix have solidified the top 2. There wouldn't have been any kind of way that I would have put maybe somebody from another weight class coming in there other than those 2 at that weight. But yeah, I would probably put Vito right kind of where he needs to be right there.
Yeah. I mean, this feels like RBI is 1A, Fix is 1AA. And then a bunch of these guys on any given day. I mean, McGee's been really good, but like if he lost to Chris Cannon, I mean, he smoked Ragusin in that dual meet that got all goofed up because of COVID down there in Texas. But it feels like a lot of these guys on any given day could beat each other. I'll ask you about this, Grant. What are your thoughts on Iowa here with Schriever or Teskey? Like Teskey, going up. First of all, who would you guess starts, and how well do you think they'll end up at the end of the year?
I mean, Brody Teskey was a Big 10 or Big 12 champion last year at 125. I think Teskey moving up to 33 is going to be interesting. I know that Schriever's been kind of been laying in wait behind AD, just kind of seeing like how, basically he would perform at 133 pounds. But I think the biggest thing for, I would say Iowa, and I would probably say anybody from, I say probably 6 through 16 is like, I think there's a very even tier there, and even could go up into the, the 5-6 range, between 5 and 6, all the way down to like 16, 17, 18. Those guys are pretty good in there. Now, once again, each match could be variables and all that kind of thing, but I think, having all Americans all the way down to basically, 14 there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talent that is log jammed right there at that round of 12 national tournament bid.
Those round of 16 and round of 12 matches at this weight class are going to be insane. So, Mark, you and I have talked a lot off the air about, let's talk about two guys that have either transferred schools or changing weights. Taylor Lamont moves from Utah Valley at 25, goes up to 33 at Wisconsin. Sam Latona moves up from 25 to 33 and feels like that's an absolute improvement for him, which is as tall as he is. What are your thoughts on those two guys?
I think Lamont's going to do fine at 33 just because he's got some skills that a lot of these kids don't have with the Greco background. He can hit you with a headlock from anywhere. Gas tank kind of worries me a little bit with him because he kind of broke at nationals, which kind of surprised me, but that might have been the weight cut. I'm not sure. And I think Latona is a perfect fit for him. When I pick my guy that's going to be an All-American out of the top 8, Latona is going to be the guy I pick. I just think it's a good fit. I think he's got range. I think he's going to be hard to score on. And I think he's going to excel at 133.
Yeah, and it points.
One other thing, David, before I stop on this weight.
Sure.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't Vito beat Fix in freestyle?
Well, Vito made the Olympic trial final, so he had to have beaten Dayton, right?
Yes.
Grant?
Back in 16?
No, 21, because it was Vito against Gilman in the Olympic trial finals, right?
Yeah.
So Vito can wrestle with the best of the best. I think that's why he's number 3. He doesn't deserve to be number 2 or number 1 because we're not going to take freestyle against, the collegiate style. But that's why I think they bumped him up to 3 because I don't think McGee, Bird, Ragusin, Cannon, Philippi has had a quality win like that, can compete with some of those, those top 2 guys, and I think Vito can. So I'm not saying he should be 1 or 2, but I think he fits right in there at 3, David.
Yeah, I would have ranked him 3 too, and I would have justified it based on he took 3rd at 25, and the guys that he's ranked ahead of didn't take top 3. Like if McGee had taken 3rd last year, I'd have put McGee ahead of him because he was at the same weight, and Vito's moving up a weight.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with Latona. Lamont actually, I think, beat Teskey last year in the Big 12 finals. Teskey won the 12s the year before that, and I do think the weight cut, he won that first round match, upset him, and then he looked gassed, though. We interviewed him in the back, and then he just looked different. I think him training with Barnett and, probably doing some Greco with Austin Gomez and, playing around with those guys probably will help him there. The room's deeper in Wisconsin than it is Utah Valley. Obviously, the Jamie Hernandez ranking, just the discrepancy there is really interesting. It'll be interesting to see. I think Rayvon Foley was a little small for this weight last year. He'll adjust. Mickey Philippi, if you go back a couple years, has that win in college over Dayton Fix. So we know how high his ceiling can be. To me, it feels like and Grant, you said this. To me, there's sort of a hard line at number 15 of these guys. I would be shocked if anybody else placed. The one wild card here, I think, is Wyatt Henson. He spent a year here in St. Louis and was with us at CBC High School. And he transferred in from Iowa in the portal. He's going down for 1 year, according to Rosselli, and then going to go back up. He's a good hand fighter. I mean, there's no way you can be Sammy Henson's son and not be a good hand fighter. And if he can hold the weight for a year, he's going to be really solid. And then the other thing, GT, that you had pointed out, like the ACC is good at this weight with Philippi, Hernandez, Arini, and Latona. Even if you sort of put Hernandez in the middle, like at 20 in the rankings, they got 3 guys in the top 13 or so. So, Marco, how many of the top 8 here? Because I'm going to be fascinated by this answer.
I'm going to go with 6 again.
Okay. Grant?
I'm going to go 5.
Okay. What is it with the word 5, Grant? What? Who do you not think out of those top 8 have a great shot at being an All-American?
Well, I think it's not necessarily a question of like why I don't think that they would be, but I think that based off of kind of how like maybe upsets would happen, you're going to get a Ragusan Cannon matchup in the round of 12, and they're going to knock each other out.
Okay.
So I think because of just watching the national tournament for the past however many years, you get some of these awful round of 12 matchups against guys that were previously All-Americans. And it's like, then all of a sudden somebody like, and once again, does not slip into those spots, but like you have definite matches where like maybe the 7th and 8th guys were just placed in the bracket because somebody got hurt or something like that at the NCAAs. Sure. I think every single guy that's in the top 8 here, 100% could be an All-American. You could go 8 for 8 just with those guys. Okay. But I just think with everything that how volatile the NCAA tournament is, nothing's ever guaranteed, because I can see Philippi and Lucas Bird wrestling in the round of 12 somehow.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like this, like a lot of the weights is very Big Ten top heavy, 5 out of the top 9. And so maybe a Foley doesn't end up with the 9 seed, like maybe a Kolioko. So I put 6, and here's why I did, in case anybody cares. I don't think Vito ends up here, so that's one of them. And I think, like Grant said, there's at least one of the other ones that doesn't happen. The other thing is, like I said, unless Wyatt Henson does something, I feel like it's 15 deep, and half of those guys, of those 9 through 15, 3 of them are going to knock each other out in the round of 16. So then it's really, can like a Lamont squeeze in? Can a Latona squeeze in, who we know that's who Mark's got as his non-top 8er and is a crafty, smart pick as usual. But a lot of these, again, is like matchup styles. Like maybe Latona wrestles Philippi in the round of 12 and he just can't beat him for some reason. But maybe he wrestles a Foley or something like that, or even like a Ragusan, and maybe that's, I'm not saying this is the case, but maybe his length gives him trouble. So is it safe to say everybody's going RBY fix here for the finals?
I am.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just want to make sure nobody was heavily medicated this morning. So, okay. I think then maybe let's pick 2 top guys here.
Oh, 2. Ooh.
Okay. Ooh. Well, I mean, we're chalk on, and I think you have to be chalk. So, Mark, I know you got Latona.
Yeah, I do.
What you think about the second one? I'll go to GT. We'll do it that way.
Outside of the top 8, they could be an All-American.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Kolioko.
Okay. I got to spell his name right here. Okay. Am I allowed to take Iowa?
You are.
Okay.
Just whoever's wearing the black and gold.
Yeah. I'm going to do that. Appreciate you guys letting me do that. All right. Mark?
Iowa.
Okay. All right. GT.
I get 2 guys. I get 2 guys, Grant. You can't blame me.
Clearly, I would be a complete hypocrite if I blamed you. GT, who you got?
I'll take Foley.
Okay. I'm gonna take Arini. I know him. He's a Missouri boy. Had a good year last year, and him and Tremblay were battling it out. And I think now that he's the guy, they can spend a little more time working on just him winning. And also, if you're the 12, you wrestle the 5. If you can win the 5-12 matchup, even if you lose the 4, the matchup on the backside gets a little easier. So, all right, let me get in here and stop sharing. Stop sharing. I almost hit stop recording, which would have been terrible. All right, let's see what else we got here. So let's talk about, we got a few minutes before Mark's got to go. Bill Zadek was on Matt Chat yesterday. I highly encourage people to watch this, not because I said anything smart, but he just gave a lot of really cool answers to some things and some great stories about Joe Russell too. And Shannon Doherty, I don't want to pronounce her name wrong, but said that she's really the glue. Grant, you probably know Shannon better than Mark and I do combined, but apparently she's just a freaking beast when it comes to getting things done and allowing those guys to function. But Bill's a leader, and he's in a leadership position, and his thoughts on leadership and his thoughts on delegation and his thoughts on consensus and team building and gathering ideas from other coaches and sharing ideas with other coaches was, I won't say surprising, but it was fascinating. Hey, I'm going to talk to XYZ coach. I'm going to talk to, then how so-and-so is beating, say, the lefty underhook from the Iranians. Well, if it worked for this person, maybe we should be implementing that into our team strategy as a whole. So I got to ask him one question about, do people share technique? And he said it actually happens a lot in the room. Grant, I don't know if you've ever been in those training camp rooms or not, and certainly I'd welcome your commentary on this, but it was very interesting to listen to him talk about that.
Well, I haven't necessarily been at a lot of the training camps where being on the mat and seeing what those guys talk about and everything, but I do know that there is a good, I would say, collective between the minds of the athletes where it's like, hey, what are you thinking about this? And I think if you're going to be good at basically anything, you have to have some sort of a collective where you bounce ideas off of people. Like, I know that off air, I know we talk about a lot of wrestling stuff that just is like on our minds. It's like, well, you can't really necessarily do all that in a vacuum. Like, you got to have good ideas bouncing off each other's thought processes. So it's very cool to get a little inside look into the glimpse of Bill Zadek, who is one of the best freestyle coaches on the planet, and definitely has a very great support staff. And I would echo Joe Russell, man, that guy, what a great dude. So
he said, he goes, there's a lot of great people in wrestling. There's no person in wrestling better than Joe Russell. And I thought that was incredibly well said. No disrespect to anybody else, but this guy don't take a back seat to anyone. So, Mark, you were one of my mentors in teaching me how to recruit, and certainly have been a sounding board and sort of a sanity check for me when we're doing the rankings and running border brawl and things like that. When you look at how well this team's done, I think it's probably fascinating to see how Bill and these other people have got him there, right?
Yeah, and I guess the thing that kind of surprises me is Bill is so calm when he's there, because you got to remember, David, at the Worlds and the Olympics, Bill's not actually the head coach. He's the head coach for USA Wrestling, but he lets the RTC coaches there coach the athletes. And that's hard to do when you're the number one man. Let somebody else take control because he has faith in these guys. They've been with these kids. You know, Bill spends probably a month, you know, maybe in a year period with these kids with training camps and stuff. But it's that RTC coach that spends all that time with them. And he's able to separate from there. And I'm sure he's talking to the ears of these coaches. This is what he needs to do. Make sure we do this because this is what this guy's going to do. I've watched a lot of film on him. So that's a big point. And that's got to be hard to do for somebody that's number one guy that knows what he's doing to let these other coaches actually do their jobs as RTC coaches. So you got to give him credit for that. And I think that's what he thinks of Russell. I think that's why he thinks Russell's such an amazing person because he sits back in the background and gives his ideas, which are probably phenomenal ideas.
Take out probably, and you're 100% right. Yeah.
He doesn't try to take the leadership role. He lets the process work the way it needs to work. And that's why I think the USA has done so well in the last few years is because they've got so many people in their corner helping these kids.
Well, one of the reasons why I enjoyed this podcast so much was, one, it's Bill's attic. Two, it's after the team won the world title. But three is I got to ask a lot of those questions like, hey, do the first chair and second chair communicate to each other? What are you saying on those 30-second breaks? How much of your life is breaking down film? And then when you break down film, like let's say it's how to beat Kumar. Are you giving that data to Cody Sanderson? Are you giving that straight to Thomas Gilman? I'm telling you, like, if you're a wrestling nerd, it was a really cool podcast because there's just a lot of those questions. It'd just be like if I got to talk to Nick and Grant and Reedy and all those, the other Grant at Grandview, like, how does it really work? And I mean, you don't win that many national titles in a row and it's like, we just all kind of show up and hopefully it works out. You know what I mean? Like that. I know that's not what happens. Right. So, people give you less when they know they're on the air, but when people are your friends, they give you more than people that aren't their friends. And I got a chance to sit with Bill and JG and Joe at the US Open in the semifinals for like 2.5 hours and just watch the whole session with them. And I think that built a bridge, even a bigger bridge of trust and communication. So it was really fun. Marco, I know you got to head to the train.
Yep.
So we will say sayonara. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys, and I will talk to you next week.
See you, boy.
Bye-bye.
So last couple subjects here, Grant. Bo Nickel, 5 fights this year, 5 first-round finishes, headed to the UFC. And, some people that know a lot more about fighting than you and I do have talked about there's no really great wrestlers in the UFC. And if anybody saw the YouTube clip, Nickel actually got a submission, a triangle from the bottom last night. So he's not just taking guys down and grounding and pound them. One of the things that, like, most people are right leg leads and people think that's right-handed. And actually in fighting, when you're a right leg lead, you're left-handed because your backhand is your power hand. So Nickel fights like he wrestled right leg lead, but he's a southpaw, which creates a whole nother set of problems for people. Probably one of the more decorated wrestlers, like arguably is more decorated, at least his college career, Olympic career than Daniel Cormier. And he might be the most decorated college guy because Cejudo didn't go to college. So, what are your thoughts on Nickel and then just how that represents wrestling as a whole?
Well, everybody that's a fan of wrestling is probably a humongous Bo Nickel fan. Because you've seen him come up through the ranks and, be, age group and then his college and then, getting a bronze, I believe world title at U23s. So I think internationally he has a very good, prowess as well. Like maybe not as much as, like Henry and, Askren or, Cormier and all those guys that basically were Olympians. And, just because he was an Olympian doesn't mean he's a freaking just bad man.
He was the Olympic alternate this year, right?
David, yeah,
right?
Because he was behind
Taylor. Because he beat Zahid and then lost to Taylor in the finals. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, Bo is, a very, very good representation of wrestling as a sport in a sport category. And he carries himself. He's very confident, to say the least, in his abilities and kind of, what he's able to do. So I think it's a big pull for wrestling, and just knowing that, like, hey, we can produce very good MMA and professional athletes through USA Wrestling.
For sure. Nick Suriano to the Cliff Keen Wrestling Club, not a shock, right? That's the Cliff Keen is the Michigan Wrestling Club. That's where Sergey is. That's where Pantaleo is. That's where Jaden is. So absolutely no Nike athletes up there at all. So you don't know that relationship well at all. But another hammer in the room. And Suriano's sort of the mystery man at 57 kgs, right? Like, isn't as offensive as you'd like him to be sometimes, but on his best day is nearly impossible to score on. Has had some epic matches with Dayton Fix at age group level, and that bolsters that RTC, really, really well. Gives them a guy who's a legit threat to make national teams, world teams, and medal. So, that's a big bolster for them, right?
Oh yeah, I think keeping them around is going to help out. The Dylan Ragnusons and Micic and some of those other guys that are continuing to have Olympic and world team aspirations at those categories, and then help the college guys as well.
Yeah, for sure. Two last things. First of all, we ran Border Brawl Saturday. Thank you to all the people that came out. Thank you to all the people that watched on Flow. Thank you for all the kind comments. Probably the biggest compliment were the uniforms, which is no surprise. So kids look super crispy. GT, great job as usual. For those, we are running one in Oklahoma, guys. If you have kids that are interested in wrestling that the Tuesday night before nationals, holler at us, let us know. And they will also be wearing Nike. I'm not calling them doublets, cool 2-piece uniforms with awesome quarter zips. And if anybody asks why we do that, it's because most 15, 18-year-olds need one more singlet like they need another homework assignment. It's not anything they're going to use ever again. And where they can work out this, they can do jiu-jitsu, they can go to the gym, they can go to the pool, they can do all these other things. So the last thing, which you brought up to us on the pre-podcast meeting, Grant, was that they have changed the Olympic qualifying process. So you kind of want to walk through that with people?
Yeah. So, it was just a new qualification process for the basically Paris Olympic Games. It's going to end up being the same amount of wrestlers. We're not losing any weight classes. It's the exact same process or same total, but a different process basically getting through it. So as any of our listeners would know, like basically the largest way or the best way to qualify with the most positions is at the World Championships in 2023, which we do not know the location yet for that World Championships. And at that World Championships, basically all four medalists, meaning gold, silver, and both bronzes, would secure their nation for the Olympic Games in Paris. The fifth spot would then be dedicated to a bout between the two wrestlers that lost the bronze medal matches. So
to interrupt real quick, there's normally 2 fifths. This year, there'll be a 5th and a 6th.
Correct. So basically, the year previous, if you got into the bronze medal match, you qualified your country for the Olympic Games. Moving forward, the 2 guys that lose in the bronze medal match will then have a specific wrestle-off for that 5th spot to qualify their nation at the World Championships.
So you and I both lose in the bronze medal match. You and I wrestle each other. You win. You represent America. I represented Japan. America is now qualified. You're Correct. Not qualified. America is qualified.
America is qualified. And once again, more than likely in a lot of different countries and the situation, if you're the guy that qualifies the weight class, you're more than likely going. Now, once again, everybody has a different trials process, globally. But let's say, for instance,
the Daniel Dennis, Tony Ramos situation is a perfect
Correct.
example. Yeah. Okay.
So
and in our country, taking 5th does not automatically even put you in Final X.
No.
Okay. So
in the second phase, basically it is the Continental Championship quota. So for instance, if we don't qualify a weight class like we did at heavyweight this year with Hayden Zilmer, Hayden would then go and represent the United States at the Pan American Championships, Olympic qualifying tournament, and then try to qualify the weight class and be in the finals. You would have to make finals, meaning top 2 in the Continentals. So Pan Am's, Europeans, Asian Championships, and Africa and Oceanic. So there's 4 global qualifying Continental Championships that would then qualify the next. Now,
and to give people a quick example, sorry to interrupt, but like last time, Zane at 65 kilos was our guy and lost in the semis to Argentina, like got pinned doing a leg lace. And then that forced Jordan Oliver, who won our trials, to go try to make the last chance qualifier, which you're going to get to in a minute. But just so people understand that. And furthermore, those Pan Ams are a blind draw. So like you're really just trying to get separated from the Cuban for the most part. You know, like those are generally the 2 best countries in men's freestyle wrestling. And we're just using men's freestyle as an example, but it applies to all, you know, Greco and women's as well. All right, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, 100%. And let's say, for instance, at the World Championships, at whatever, 65 kg, Ecuador, Venezuela, Chile, Brazil, and Cuba were the top 5 at that weight class.
That'd be a dream for us.
Right? So that would leave like Guatemala and
America.
America to qualify at the Pan American Championships. So if you've already qualified through the World Championships, so like if the U.S. had the tournament that they just had, which was historic and like unreal, they would have already qualified all of those weight classes and would not have had to send anybody to the Pan American Championships Olympic qualifying tournament in order to try to qualify the weight class because they've already been there. So you don't
the eight for sure. Like the Gilmans, et cetera. And then it would have depended on it. We'd have 8.5. It would have depended on if Gross would have won his 5th place match. Right.
Correct.
Just so people understand that. Zilmer was 7th, so they'd have to go to Pan Am's. And the other 8 clearly would not, because we had 4 gold, 4 silver. And then Gross would have either taken 5th or 6th, and that would depend on if he goes or not.
Correct.
So that gets us to 13 instead of 14. And then by default, the last chance becomes now instead of 2, 3. And what you told us was that, let's say you and I both lose in the semis now, or we both win the bronze medal, the repechage. Now we wrestle each other for that last spot. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in the third and final phase will be the World Olympic qualifier offers 3 quotas to each Olympic weight class instead of 2 that it previously offered. So there's a total of 54 wrestlers that can qualify for the tournament. So then basically, apart from the 36 finalists that are across all 3 styles, the bronze medal winner would also have to have a challenge to get a quota for their country with an additional wrestle-off held between the 2 people that got bronze medals at that tournament.
Yeah. So basically, to summarize for people, previous years it was 6 worlds, 8 continentals, 2 last chance. Now it's 5 worlds, 8 continentals, 3 last chance. You go from 6 to 5, which means the 2 5th place guys or girls wrestle the losers out. And the last chance goes from 2 to 3, which means the 2 where they never wrestled repechage at last chance because there was no reason to. Well, maybe they did, because if there was like a positive drug test or something, like, and that's how Molinaro got in, you know, a couple, like in 16. Now that match becomes super relevant. And then let's say you beat me to get in the Olympics, I become the first alternate if anything goofy happens, right?
Correct.
Do you think that helps us or hurts us as a country? Because I think that's what everybody's going to want to know, this new process.
I don't think it necessarily, I think it probably maybe hurts the U.S. because it's not guaranteed if you get into the bronze medal match, which, I mean, we have a very, very good chance of getting to the bronze medal matches in kind of all of our styles. So I would say in both men's freestyle, women's freestyle, and Greco, if we get to a medal match at the World Championships, it's a good chance that we're going to go. But now with us having to wrestle off the other 5th, I mean, it does kind of level that talent field, because some people get into a medal match and it's like, well, how did, you know, like they had a very small bracket and whatever. but I think keeping the Continentals to 2 is the right call.
For sure. It's so unbalanced, right? Like there's some and like when you mentioned, and by the way, really good on your geography for naming 5 Central or South American countries right off the top of your head. But for example, like in Asia, if you take, those countries out, or Europe, where a lot of times there are multiple people that qualify at the world level, like especially in women's, like if Japan and China, Japan qualifies almost everybody. So now the third place person in that Continental has a better chance of qualifying because the Japanese wrestler is not even in the bracket, because they place top 5 at Worlds. I mean, I think here's the thing. Like I was talking to Bill about this, like it's hard. There's a lot of people that are wrestling fans, but it's hard. Like there's high school rules and college rules and international rules. And then team scoring was different. Like, you can't chase down team scoring until people make at least the finals, because then who's in the repechage and all this stuff. It's not like NCAAs where in the morning, like the leading team's got 18 points. Nobody's got anything. It's just, hey, we got everybody alive, and
Right.
You're only wrestling 3 or 4 a day, where they're wrestling all 10 weights here, all 14 weights at state, so it's just a different process. So hopefully people can understand this. And if not, they can obviously ping us, ping USA Wrestling, and we can just put out a quick thing, put it up on the board. I feel like our job here is to not only entertain, but hopefully educate and help people. So when they're at a sports bar, they're at a cocktail party, they maybe know a little bit more than the person next to them. And a lot of the people that watch and listen to this, they're the expert on wrestling in their area. And we appreciate them listening to us, watching us. Hopefully, we're giving you guys a little more knowledge, but it's all because we got guys like Mark and Grant. We're able to pick the brains of the smartest people in the wrestling world. So for Mark, and we didn't get first name Mark this week, but I know by the time we hit Cassiope, we will. And Sasso, we'll hit him next week. Sammy is coming. First name Sammy. So
Yeah.
For Mark and GT, I'm David. We'll speak to you all next week.